They thought they could bend your perception, like smoke, in a dim-lit room. Twist your reality until your own memory turned against you. It's a clever little game, one that thrives on confusion, repetition, and charm, laced with venom. They spoke with confident eyes, hands steady, tone just soft enough to disguise the manipulation beneath their words. You're remembering it wrong. I never said that. You're too sensitive. Each sentence carefully chosen, like a magician hiding their trick not in what they show, but in what they distract you from. But what they never realized was that you weren't just listening, you were recording. And your mind? It doesn't delete, it dissects. They used silence like a scalpel. Strategic withdrawal, deliberate indifference. You'd speak your truth, and they'd vanish behind apathy, making you doubt your own pain. And when you questioned it, when your voice trembled asking, "Did that really happen the way I felt it?" They saw it as victory. That flicker of doubt, that was the fuel. Gaslighting doesn't require fire, it just needs oxygen. And you gave it willingly at first, because you believed in the good in people. You thought mutual respect was a given. You didn't realize you were speaking to someone who weaponized certainty. They didn't want to understand you. They wanted to reprogram you. But the thing about gaslighting is, it depends on your participation. It survives only as long as you chase their approval. And then something in you snapped. Not with rage, not with chaos, with clarity. The quietest awakening is often the most lethal. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped defending your version of the story because you realized you weren't confused. You were being manipulated. That shift, it short-circuited their system because once you stop looking to them for truth, they lose their throne. Once you look in the mirror and trust what you see, the illusion dies. And when it dies, it screams. They tried to convince you that you were crazy, that your instincts were flawed, that your boundaries were overreactions. But your nervous system doesn't lie. It remembers tone. It remembers patterns. And it kept whispering what your logic tried to silence. This doesn't feel right. You couldn't articulate it back then. Gaslighting rarely gives you the evidence you need. It starves you of proof and leaves you with suspicion. But the beauty of your evolution is this. You no longer need to prove a pattern to recognize it. You know. And that knowing, that unshakable awareness, is the scar that became a sword. They noticed the change in you when you stopped responding with emotion, when your silence grew teeth, when your eyes stopped pleading and started studying. You stopped asking questions, not because you were content, but because you had answers they couldn't manipulate anymore. You saw through the cracks in their carefully rehearsed stories, the inconsistencies in their tone, the micro-expressions they tried to suppress. You started to remember clearly, and memory is dangerous to manipulators, because memory, when trusted, becomes resistance. And resistance becomes revolution. They panicked when you got quiet, not because they missed your voice, but because they sensed they were losing their grip. Gaslighters thrive on access. They need your emotional response to control the narrative. But you changed the channel. You stopped broadcasting your confusion. You stopped inviting them into your mental space. And when they came knocking, armed with faux concern and faux humility, you answered with distance. Not a wall, a void. Because a wall can be knocked down. A void. It echoes their emptiness back at them until they can't bear the sound. You weren't cruel. You were done. And that terrified them. Because gaslighting doesn't fear confrontation. It fears clarity. It fears someone walking away, without drama, without explanation, without even needing to be understood. And when you left, you took the mirror with you. They no longer had a place to rehearse their performance. They no longer had an audience to manipulate. Now, they sit alone with the script that once controlled you. And it sounds ridiculous without your confusion echoing back. People like that don't believe in truth. They believe in control. And once you no longer needed them to confirm your reality, their power evaporated. You became untouchable, not through revenge, but through certainty. You learned that your gut was never broken. It was just being gaslit into silence. And now it speaks with authority. It guides you like a weapon, forged in every moment you were made to question yourself. And that weapon? It slices through illusion before it even takes shape. Let them frame your liberation as betrayal. It's all part of their system, trying to reset itself. But it won't work, because you no longer exist in that framework. You've upgraded. You see through performance now. Now they sit in the echo chamber of their own narrative, where once your doubt filled the void with questions they could answer, redirect, or twist. But your absence has robbed them of their favorite tool, your uncertainty. And that's the part they can't rebuild. They can mimic your vocabulary, steal your phrases, pretend to have learned what you taught through pain. But they can't resurrect the version of you that second-guessed their motives. That version of you is ashes now. What remains is something forged in betrayal's aftermath. A being that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, and doesn't forgive, simply because someone says the word sorry with trembling lips and empty eyes. You've transcended their need to be right. And when you no longer need someone to validate your experience, you disarm their entire personality. They miss the version of you that could be guilted into silence. The one that doubted their own anger. The one that stayed up at night, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they were being too dramatic. That's the gold mine they used to dig through. Your self-doubt was their currency, and now you've gone bankrupt in all the right ways. There's no more gold left to steal. You stopped mining your own soul just to keep the peace. You stopped being the emotional custodian for people who only cleaned up when they were caught. That realization didn't come from a single moment. It came slowly, like ink seeping through water, until one day the whole glass turned dark and you could no longer unsee the stain. And when you finally confronted them, not with words, but with withdrawal, they didn't know how to respond, because manipulators rehearse for battles of emotion. They're ready for tears, accusations, slamming doors. But indifference unravels them. You walked away like a tide pulling back from the shore, exposing everything buried beneath their carefully curated image. They tried to chase, not with love, but with confusion. That's how they function. If they can't hold your heart, they'll aim for your mind. They'll try to twist your departure into abandonment, your clarity into cruelty, your healing into betrayal. But deep down, they know. You were never the villain. You were the final mirror they couldn't shatter. The aftermath of gaslighting is often not rage. It's quiet intelligence, the kind that no longer debates, no longer explains, no longer attends conversations that have no intention of ending in truth. You don't offer rebuttals now. You offer space. And in that space, they meet themselves. Every tactic they use to blur your vision now circles back and fogs their own. That's the poetic justice they never anticipated. You didn't need revenge. You just needed to remember clearly. And clarity cuts deeper than any insult ever could. Because clarity rewrites history in its rightful ink. It doesn't matter how many times they tried to convince you otherwise. You now know what happened. And that knowing will never leave you again. What they called overreacting was actually your nervous system screaming for justice. What they labeled insecurity was your intuition identifying inconsistencies. What they dismissed as paranoia was your body processing betrayal in real time. But you had to learn the hard way that gaslighting doesn't just distort events, it distorts identity. You started questioning not just what happened, but who you were for reacting to it. That's what made it so brutal. It wasn't just that they lied, it's that they made you feel broken for sensing the lie. But now you wear that instinct like armor. You trust your gut with holy reverence, because you remember what it cost you to ignore it the first time. You're not cold now. You're calibrated. You're not bitter. You're precise. You don't cut people off out of spite. You cut them off because you've done the math, and the equation no longer serves your soul. And while they stand there, disoriented by your distance, you've already left the arena, because you no longer fight battles where your only weapon is proving your pain. If someone needs evidence of their own behavior to believe your wounds, they were never safe to begin with. You've learned to listen to your pain like a prophet, not a parasite. You've turned your triggers into tools, and now you don't beg for respect. You walk where it already exists. They tried to gaslight you, but they forgot who they were dealing with. You weren't just a heart with feelings. You were a mind with memory, a soul with sensors, a being that took every betrayal and wove it into wisdom. And that wisdom now shines through your silence. You don't speak for validation anymore. You speak to warn, to protect the future from the past, to ensure that no version of you ever returns to a cage it had to burn to escape. You saw right through them. And now, they're left staring into the void where your confusion used to be, only to see the truth they tried to bury.